Insuring a single oil tanker to cross the Strait of Hormuz now costs as much as $10 million, up from roughly $250,000 5 months ago, a 40-fold jump for the exact same ship, route, and cargo. That number comes from marine insurers repricing war risk on a 33-kilometer channel that, in ordinary times, carries close to a fifth of the world's oil. These are not ordinary times. For 9 consecutive nights, American aircraft have struck Iranian military targets, and Brent crude closed last night at $89.22 a barrel, its highest close in weeks, as a ceasefire that was supposed to end this war continues to fall apart in real time. 3 weeks ago, the official story was de-escalation. Goldman Sachs had just cut its U.S. recession odds from 30% back down to 15%. Oil was drifting toward $80 a barrel, and a June memorandum of understanding between Washington and Tehran was supposed to hold for 60 days while both sides negotiated something durable. That story is no longer true. Iran has declared the ceasefire dead. Houthi forces in Yemen have announced a maritime embargo against Saudi Arabia, and the insurance market, which prices risk faster than any diplomat issues a statement, is telling a very different story than the one still being repeated on cable news. The Strait of Hormuz sits between Iran and Oman, a choke point so narrow that tankers navigate it in 2-mile-wide traffic lanes in each direction. In an average year, about 20 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum products move through it every single day. Roughly 1/5 of everything the world consumes, and by some measures, more than a third of all oil that moves by sea. There is no substitute route that can carry anywhere close to that volume. Pipelines around Saudi Arabia and the UAE can divert a few million barrels a day at most. The rest has nowhere else to go. The current war began on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched a coordinated operation against Iran that opened with the killing of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. What followed was months of missile and drone exchanges across the region, and a first ceasefire that produced Operation Epic Fury's formal conclusion by May 5th, only for Iran to keep testing the strait's edges, firing on commercial vessels almost as soon as the guns quieted. This is not the first time the Gulf has become a shooting gallery for oil tankers. Between 1984 and 1988, Iran and Iraq attacked each other's shipping directly, racking up 283 Iraqi strikes and 168 Iranian strikes on commercial vessels by the end of 1987 alone, killing 116 sailors. The United States eventually intervened directly, reflagging Kuwaiti tankers as American vessels and escorting them through the strait in Operation Earnest Will, the largest naval convoy operation since the Second World War. And yet, historians are clear that the tanker war never actually closed the strait and never disrupted more than about 2% of Gulf shipping traffic at any point. What's happening in 2026 has already gone further. Within days of the February outbreak, 90% of Hormuz traffic diverted away from the strait entirely. And that figure climbed above 95% once Iran began directly threatening ships. By mid-June, exhaustion on both sides produced a fragile opening. On June 17th, Washington and Tehran signed a memorandum of understanding setting a 60-day window to negotiate something more permanent. For a few weeks, it mostly held. Then, in mid-July, it didn't. As of last week, the United States had bombed Iranian targets for 9 consecutive nights, striking command centers, missile and drone sites, and coastal surveillance systems in an effort to restore safe passage through the strait. Iran has responded by targeting American positions across the Gulf and firing directly on tankers attempting to cross. 17 American service members have been killed since the war began, including one this past weekend in northern Iraq. This is no longer a contained skirmish over a shipping lane. It is an active, sustained military campaign, with a rising body count on both sides. The commercial cost is compounding by the day. Iran has struck 2 UAE-operated supertankers, the Mombasa and the Al-Baya, with cruise missiles inside the strait, killing 1 sailor and injuring 8 more. Roughly 6,000 seafarers are currently stranded in the region, while the International Maritime Organization works to evacuate vessels through safer corridors. War risk insurance premiums have surged to between 3% and 10% of a tanker's hull value, meaning a single transit that cost a shipowner $250,000 in February can now cost up to $10 million. And that is before a single barrel of cargo is insured. Actual oil flows through the strait tell the same story in hard numbers. In the first quarter of 2026 alone, crude oil and petroleum liquids moving through Hormuz fell by almost 30% year over year, down to 14.6 million barrels a day from more than 20 million barrels a day the year before. A loss of roughly 6 million barrels a day of a choke point that has no real substitute. Wall Street's economic models have been whipsawing in step with the battlefield. Goldman Sachs pushed its 12-month U.S. recession probability up to 30% in late March as oil spiked, then cut it back to 15% in late June as the ceasefire appeared to hold and the bank penciled an $80 a barrel oil by year-end. J.P. Morgan, more cautious, has held its own estimate near 35%, and EY Parthenon has gone further still, putting recession odds at 40% on the grounds that the damage cascades well beyond crude into LNG and refining infrastructure. Not everyone agrees the U.S. is exposed the same way. BNP Paribas has argued the country is comparatively insulated as the world's largest crude producer and a net energy exporter, meaning higher prices redistribute income domestically rather than draining it abroad. But every one of those models was built before this week's Houthi embargo announcement against Saudi Arabia, which threatens to choke off the very pipeline relief valve that Gulf producers have been using to bypass Hormuz altogether. Based on the pattern since February, the most likely path through the rest of the year is not a clean resolution, but a cycle of flare-ups and fragile lulls. Strikes, a pause, quiet diplomacy, then strikes again. The same rhythm regional forecasters were already describing before this week's escalation. Under that path, Brent crude likely keeps oscillating in a roughly $80 to $95 a barrel band, with insurance and shipping costs staying structurally elevated even during the quiet stretches, because underwriters don't unprice a war that could restart with one Iranian missile. There is a better branch and a worse one. If mediators manage to revive something like the collapsed June memorandum, oil could ease back toward the $80 a barrel level Goldman had penciled in before this week. The World Bank's own 2026 baseline sits at $86 a barrel. But if the Houthi embargo holds, and Hormuz disruption becomes sustained rather than episodic, the World Bank's own upside case points to Brent averaging as high as $115 a barrel. Allianz Research's own downside scenario goes further still. A closure lasting more than 3 months, oil spiking temporarily to $180 a barrel, and the Eurozone tipping into a technical recession, a scenario that would land EY Parthenon's 40% U.S. recession probability much closer to a base case than a tail risk. For most people, this fight over a 33-kilometer strip of water shows up somewhere much more mundane. The pump price on the way to work, the delivery fee on a package that had to reroute around Africa instead of through the Gulf, the interest rate the central bank won't cut because energy-driven inflation won't let it. The strait itself is thousands of miles from most of the people paying for what happens there. 9 nights of strikes in, with a ceasefire that's already dead, and a $10 million insurance bill for a $250,000 policy, the question isn't really whether the Strait of Hormuz matters to your wallet. It's how much higher the price of finding that out is about to get.